Dream Dancers, Book 1 of the Akashic Chronicles, The Witches of Scotland series, Glasgow, by Stephen P. Aitchison. Read by me, Stephen P. Aitchison. Prologue. Budapest, 6 months ago. The medical lab was small when compared to the other Viritech labs around the world, and only 3 scientists had worked there for the last 18 months, for good reason. The virus had taken 14 months to perfect, and now it was time to test it on the world. The 10 armed guards walked the perimeter of the facility in turns. It took 16 minutes to complete a full circuit. When not walking the perimeter, each guard trekked slowly from building to fence, sweeping their eyes from left to right. The security system was so sensitive, if a rabbit happened to hop past the area, it triggered the lights as well as 10 MP5K machine guns from the guards. Jessica Campbell floated inside the facility, watching the lab workers gingerly move about the room. Their arm-length rubber gloves and gas masks hinted at the volatility of what they held. She observed them from the corner of the ceiling, since the view was far more advantageous. This is it. Be calm. You've got 5 minutes to get this right. She had to keep her heart rate slow and steady, or risk being catapulted back to Edinburgh in milliseconds. The lab workers, 2 men and 1 woman, didn't speak to each other tonight. Normally, they were a chatty bunch as they worked, having grown close over the last year and a half. They often talked about the money they would receive after successfully completing this assignment. Everyone had agreed to quit their jobs as epidemiologists and travel abroad. Tonight, they were close to the payoff, close to ending the sleepless nights, the worry, the guilt. They all knew, of course, that the payoff wouldn't really have that effect. The results of all their hard work would only add to their anxiety. The deaths of millions of older people around the world would forever be on their consciences, and Jess knew they all had asked themselves if it would be worth it. Would never worrying about money be enough to assuage the guilt? That's when rationalisation and justification entered the equation. How did you press forward otherwise? She'd often heard the weak justifications as they worked. They told each other the elderly were a drain on the economy, a drain on pensions, on healthcare services, on the welfare state and employment figures, not to mention a drain on families. They had a job to do tonight, and they did it in silence. Jessica knew the time had finally come to materialise and stop the virus from being unleashed. She also knew the consequences if she failed and fought hard to control her racing pulse. Her vision faded in and out as her energy level spiked. Come on, you've got this. Calm, deep breaths. In through your nose and out through your mouth. She breathed out a final sigh of relief as her vision remained fixed, her heart rate slow and steady. She lowered herself down to ground level, preparing to materialise. One of the lab workers turned around suddenly and looked straight at her. He couldn't see her, but she knew he must have sensed something or felt her energy. He continued to look at her and around her. Jessica stayed still, willing him to get back to work. He glanced at the others and then at Jessica. After seeing no reaction from his co-workers, he shook it off and continued. The scientist packed a sturdy casing with 10 large glass vials. Jessica considered all the months of planning involved to prepare for this moment. She was instrumental in the mission's success or failure. Her training had been intense and stressful, made even worse so due to their timeline and what was at stake, not to mention the negative impact heavy practice had on her body. There were only so many times a person could travel before it took its toll on both body and mind. She crouched low, waiting for a moment, thinking about the day her father had first revealed the threat of the virus not 4 months ago. Dream dancers were diligent in their quest to elevate humanity, and any threats to that were promptly reported and addressed. One particular dream dancer had been astral sniffing when he stumbled upon the threat, immediately reporting it to her father. The head of this organisation was an unknown, but the labs were easily located. Outraged, her father had recruited her and another dream dancer to spy on the facility, but they had not been prepared for the virus to be ready so soon. No other dream dancers had been trained to port over vast distances such as Edinburgh to Boston, so her training had been intense. She just hoped she could pull it off. Jessica took a deep breath and slowly crept up behind the 3 scientists as they put the rest of the vials into the foam-moulded casing. Once the last vial was secured, they closed it. This is it. Jessica's pulse rose again in anticipation, her vision becoming a little blurry as she looked from worker to worker. She had to act now before they had padlocked it. She closed her eyes and visualised the light and energy rising from the soles of her feet up to the crown of her head and beyond. Sensation soon followed. She had practiced this hundreds of times before, so it was relatively easy, but there was still a part of her that wondered if it would work in this type of setting. When it really mattered. When it would save millions of lives. Only 30 seconds to do it. Her body began to materialise in front of the lab workers. At first they couldn't quite comprehend what was going on, which bought Jessica a little more time. Shit, I'm losing it! She wasn't materialising quick enough, not as she had in training. One of the scientists stood back, his mouth agape. Shit, he's going to scream. Much to her relief, her materialisation sped up. Although it took only a few seconds, it felt like an age. With the lab workers temporarily stunned, Jessica grabbed the case of 10 vials and tipped it out onto the ground, smashing the glass and releasing a poisonous, noxious gas, capable of killing them all within 20 seconds of inhalation. Jessie noted 1 vial had remained intact. 17 seconds to go. She took the empty case and smashed it on the unbroken vial. 14 seconds to go. She would be dead too if she didn't hurry this up. The vapours of gas from the vials began to rise and hiss, spreading all over the floor of the lab. The scientists stood motionless for a few seconds, confusion and disbelief paralysing their movements, and then they ran for the exit. Jessica, despite being at the back, ported to the exit before them and pressed the emergency shut-in button. This would lock and seal the room in case of extreme emergency. 9 seconds to go. The fumes from the vials filled the room. The scientists still had their masks on, remaining safe but still confused as they tried to keep track of Jessica. She appeared and disappeared as if blinking in and out of existence, unlocking each of their masks and ripping them off. It was done so quickly they didn't have time to react and immediately started coughing and spluttering. Jessica quickly crossed the room to the sealed cabinet and reached her hand in to unlock the door. She located laptops and notebooks needed to be destroyed as they contained all the formulas, notes, videos and everything else required to make the deadly virus. She flipped the laptops, revealing the base. 5 seconds to go and I'll be dead too. The bottles of the fluoroantimonic acid had been placed in the bottom of the cabinet a few days ago, carefully hidden behind a pile of notepads. Jessica grabbed the steel bottle holder and quickly poured the acid crystals over the notebooks and the bottoms of the laptop. Sulfuric acid was then poured over the crystals, which immediately started fuming and burning through the paper and the laptops. The acid corroded the tech and paper, destroying the white tiles beneath. She had to get out of there in case the acid reacted with the oxygen in the air, and there was only a few seconds left. She quickly scanned the room, noting the dead workers. 2 seconds to go. Closing her eyes, she visualised her next destination, the security room, but lost her focus. She opened her eyes in alarm, noting she was still in the lab. The fumes were going to engulf her too. The masks, where did they leave the masks? Jessica coughed as she kept low into the edges of the room. She felt her way towards the main door where the scientists had collapsed. Why the hell didn't I grab a mask? Finding one on the ground, she quickly pulled it on, worried she hadn't made it in time. She was now completely surrounded by white smoke. She closed her eyes again and visualised the security room. Her port was violent due to the adrenaline that was coursing round her body, and she nearly landed on top of the guard who was staring at the security screen in horror at the dead scientists. His shock made him slow to react. Before his hand hit the alarm, Jessica snapped it, shattering his radius and ulnar bones at the same time. The guard let out an almighty scream and clutched his arm. She grabbed the back of his head and slammed it against the workstation, knocking him out instantly. After flinging off her mask, she quickly tapped on the keys and found the recording for that day. She located the footage of herself entering the room. It looked like static as she flitted in and out of the picture. While the speed and agility of a hacker, Jessica deleted the recording from the records and backup drive. She didn't kill the guard, feeling certain his story of events would just be too unbelievable. The scientists had died within seconds of being exposed to the virus. That would be the story, and she didn't feel bad for them. They had known the evil of their creation and its consequences. Money. It was always about money. Jessica closed her eyes and pictured herself outside the medical facility. She projected and then studied the guards surrounding the area. They seemed none the wiser, still completing their clockwork rounds. It would take at least 10 hours before anybody knew what had happened inside the medical lab. It would never be reported in the news, but there would be a backlash. She closed her eyes again and transported back to Edinburgh, where her body lay in a secure room. Jessica opened her eyes and sought her father out through the viewing window. Her father, eyes wide, searched her expression for confirmation. Jessica nodded and gave him an encouraging smile. The mission had been a success. The relief on his face was shared by other dream dancers present. He released a deep breath, as if he'd been holding it in for hours. Jessica sat up, coughing uncontrollably. She took a glass of water from the side cabinet next to her bed as a group from the programme gathered together at the window, all 7 of them, including her father. She raised her thumbs in the air and smiled while everyone cheered and celebrated. Yet Jessica Campbell knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And she couldn't do it alone. Her father, Dr. Joseph Campbell, and the team from the Kostler Institute were adamant about finding more dream dancers to assist them in their fight, keeping tabs on the energetic fields of many potentials from around the world. Jessica had been following the astral movements of one very promising dream dancer from her home country of Scotland. It was time to pay a visit to David Hunter.